What's up, everybody, and welcome to another JavaScript Nuggets video where we cover nifty JavaScript topics that will come in handy when working on various JavaScript apps. And in this video, we will cover how to add object keys dynamically using square bracket notation. Before you dismiss the topic and switch over to a different video, because in your opinion that's silly, let me just say that in my React course, it is by far the most confusing topic for the students. So of course, I wanted to cover this in this series. So let's start with the basics. We know that in JavaScript, we have objects, and then we have properties and values or key value pairs. And then we have a dot notation in order to access that value. For example, I go with person and then dot name. And of course, it is going to give me value, whatever value I have for my key. And also, of course, I can create those properties on the fly. I can say person dot age. For example, this creates a age key, and then I can set up the value. And then, of course, if I console log the person, I can see that not only I have the name, but also I have the age. Now, we also have an option of using square bracket notation. So how is that going to look like? Well, imagine we have items object, but then in the items object, I would want to set up a key with a hyphen. So I would say featured and then items. And as you can see, I'm getting the error right now. So what would be the solution? Well, we can turn this into a string, correct? Now, the thing is how we're going to access that. And I'll set the value to be an array, and I'll say item 1 and then item number 2. So back to our problem. I cannot go with log and then try to access it with items and then dot. So this is not going to work. As you notice, it right away turns it into a square bracket notation where we have square brackets and then we place a string of that particular item. So for example, in this case, it is featured items. So of course we type it. Now also, please keep in mind the same would work in our person object. For example, I could go with log and then person. And then if I would want to access name with a square bracket notation, I just need to type in name. So those are the basics. Now let's take a look at how we can set up keys dynamically using square bracket notation. I'm going to start here by creating a app state variable, and that is going to be equal to a loading. So that's my string. Then I'm going to create a new object by the name of app. I'm going to say app, and that is going to be equal. And now, of course, let's set up the key. But in this case, I'll use right away a square bracket notation, and I'll set it equal to a state. Now, for the time being, I'll just say true or false. And now let's take a look at the console log. What do you think is going to be name of this key? So I'll just go with log, and then I'm looking for the app. And now notice something interesting, where whatever is going to be value, and let me repeat, value for my variable, now it's going to be a key name. So the key name is not app state and then equal to true or false or whatever I'm going to have over here. The key name is equal to a value of the variable that I'm setting. So for example, if I'll change this around and if I'll say that app state, for example, is equal to error, now notice the key name right now in my object is equal to the value that I currently have for my app state. Before that, I had it equal to a loading. And then of course, in this case, I have it equal to an error. And of course, the same way we can add brand new properties as well, just like we did over here with person.age. So for example, I could create a new key by just typing app. So that is the name of my object. And then I'm going to use the square bracket notation. I'm going to say key name, the variable that I currently don't have, and I'm going to set it equal to an apple. Now, of course, I would need to create that variable. So let's say right after the app state, I'm going to go with const and then key name, and that is going to be equal to a computer. And again, please keep in mind one thing, where when we're using this square bracket notation, we are not setting a key name equal to a variable. We're setting it equal to whatever value I have for the variable. So if this is going to be bananas, you'll notice that in your app, the key name also will be bananas. And once this is clear, now let's take a look at the example where it's going to be really handy that we can add or change or update those values on the object dynamically. For example, I have the state object. So I'm going to go with const and then state is equal to my state object. Then I'll set, for example, loading is true, and then two values, name, and that is going to be equal to an empty string. And then, of course, also a job that is equal to an empty string. And now let's come up with a function that takes two arguments. It takes the key name and then also the value. And now I would want to update this state variable dynamically when I'm running the function. So how would you do that? With a square bracket notation. First, let's create a function. I'm going to say update and then state. And then, like I said, key and then value. And in here, if my object name is state, I simply just need to say, yeah, there's going to be a state object. And then whatever key I'll pass in over here, that's the one I'll change. And if it's a little bit confusing, don't worry. Once we start running the function, you'll see clearly what is happening. And then, of course, value is just going to be equal to a value argument that I'm passing. And now let's call this function. So we'll call update state. And now what key I would want to update or add or change? Well, I'm going to go with name because that is already one of the keys that I have in the object. Now I just need to come up with a value. So in this case, I'll pass in John. And what you'll notice if you'll console log our state that right now we have loading is equal to true. And then we dynamically updated that value. Why? Well, because we pass in the key. Now the key name is what? It is name, correct? And then in the function body, I target my object and I dynamically change the value for the name because this is the argument that I'm passing in, and also right away set up the value. So that's the cool thing using this square bracket notation. And of course, we're not limited. I can just copy and paste and I'll say that, yeah, it is going to be a job key that I'm changing right now. And then this is going to be equal to a developer like so. And also keep in mind that we can update the current keys as well. In this case, we had empty values for name and job, but loading was true, correct? So why don't we try it with loading as well? Where of course I would need to change the loading. That is going to be my key. And now instead of developer, this is going to be equal to a false. So now as I'm looking at this, I can see that I updated the value for the loading, where previously it was true. And now, of course, it is false. And of course, we're not limited to only targeting the keys that we already have. We can also create a new one. So if I'm going to go with update state, and then I will create a new key by the name of product, and I'll pass in the empty array. Notice now in the object, I have the key by the name of product or whatever you pass here, whether that is oranges, bananas, or vegan food truck. And then you have whatever value you passed it in. And lastly, I just want to mention that even though we already updated once, for example, name, I can call my function and then I can say name is now equal to a Peter. And of course, now my name key is going to have value of Peter. That's how we can dynamically change keys in the object using the square bracket notation.